It's great to be on the road. It's great to be in a live audience. It's great to be with a bunch of entrepreneurs. But I'm going to be honest, it's great to be in a room full of adults. And I'll explain, because right before COVID hit, my sister, who works in our company, she got a call from a woman who was at the Delta Gamma sorority house at Purdue University. And this young woman called and asked if I would come and speak at Purdue University on behalf of the Delta Gamma sorority house. And my sister, lovely lady, she doesn't know how to say the word no. She goes, oh, he would love to. And I got to be honest, I thought it was going to be kind of cool. I'd go to a college town. I thought I'd be the big man on campus. Two of my buddies found out I was going. They wanted to come with me. So we're heading out to the airplane, and as we're walking out the front door, there's my wife, Giuliana, and she starts laughing. And I said, honey, what in the world is so funny? She said, well, when you guys get there, you're going to think you're the big men on campus. But what's really going to happen is everyone is going to think you guys are there for Parents' Weekend. I hate when she's right. Because lo and behold, there I am at the Delta Gamma sorority house, and I meet some people, and this young lady came running up to me, and she says, oh, my God, I watched you on The Apprentice every week, never missed an episode. She starts going on, and I'm kind of smiling. And she said, you know, I was in the 3rd grade when that show was on. And then she went on to add a little more insult to injury. She goes, really, my grandma was the big fan. So it got me thinking that first season of that business competition show, believe it or not, it was 18 years ago. We filmed it in 2003, and it aired in 2004, right? And it's been an amazing experience over the last 18 years, and I get to travel all over the world. And a lot of people, they'll stop and they always say, you know, did you know you were going to win that show when you first started the competition? And I'm always very honest with people. I had no idea. You know, we had people from Harvard and Yale and all these fancy business schools. I was a guy from Chicago. I had a cigar business. I was in a real estate developer. I said I didn't know where I was going to stack up in the mix. But I always say that my mom claimed she knew when I was 10. And my mom knew that I was born to be an entrepreneur at the age of 10. And like Trevor said, it all happened on my parents' anniversary weekend. They were shipping me off to my grandmother's for the weekend because they wanted to have some quiet time for their anniversary. And I was a very inquisitive kid. I would always ask a million questions. You know, what goes here? How does this work? Why are you doing that? So my grandmother decided she was going to pull me in the kitchen and she was going to teach me how to cook. So I spent all day in that kitchen with my grandmother mastering the art of making the pancake. Blueberry, banana, chocolate chip, you name it, I could make it. So I went to bed that night and I woke up Sunday morning and I raced into my grandmother's kitchen, and the first thing I did is I picked up her old rotary telephone and I called all the old ladies who lived on my grandmother's block, and I invited these ladies to come over for a pancake breakfast. Well, they loved it. They thought it was the neatest thing they'd ever seen. This 10-year-old kid flipping these pancakes in the air. I was chatting them up. It was great. And they left, and when they left, I started to put the plates off the table. And as I was clearing the plates off the table, I discovered that each one of those ladies left a $5 bill underneath their plate. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I'm onto something here. This is good. So I took the money, I put it in my pocket, and I kept my mouth shut. And I went back home, and the week went by, and Friday afternoon, that school bus dropped me off in front of my parents' house, and I ran in the front door, and I demanded that my parents take me to my grandmother's for the weekend. It was continued for like 5 or 6 weekends, and as Trevor mentioned, my mom was in my room, and she was putting something in one of my drawers, and she found a stack of $5 bills in my sock drawer, and as any good parent out there would be, she was rather alarmed, and she demanded to know where a 10-year-old boy was able to come up with hundreds of dollars of cash. And I had to fess up I was running a makeshift restaurant out of my grandmother's house. She ended that immediately and claimed I was fleecing these ladies out of their Social Security checks. But when I look back on that experience, you know, at the age of 10, whether I knew it or not, I think I possessed a trait that is so important in anyone who wants to find success in what they're doing. And that's being able to recognize an opportunity, but more importantly, seizing that opportunity. Most people go through life and they see opportunity all around them. It's the very few that reach out, grab a hold of it, and do something with it. Most people talk a hell of a game. They're going to climb this mountain, they're going to write this book, they're going to buy this building, but it's the very few that actually do something about it. So for me, that was my start to becoming an entrepreneur. And then I worked my way through college, washing boats in Chicago and in Michigan. And when I got out of college, I took a job for a company selling metals. And I'd been on the job about, 3 months or so, 4 months. And I'd watched a guy who had been there for 30 years, 35 years. He'd gotten fired for no other reason than greed. The owners of this company didn't want to pay him the big salary anymore. He was getting older, and they let him go. And I watched this guy pack up his office, and I watched his car drive out of that parking lot that day, and it hit me right in the heart. And I watched that guy leave, and I said to myself, I'm never going to let that happen to me. And I was determined to start my own business from that day on. I started searching and searching and searching, and I was about, 6 or 7 months into my search, and I sat at an outdoor cafe. And there were these 3 European gentlemen at this outdoor cafe sitting next to me, and they pulled out the biggest cigars I'd ever seen. The way they were smelling these cigars and the way they were lighting these cigars, I said, I've got it. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start the first ever Cigar of the Month Club. No one had ever done this. I'm going to send 5 cigars to your home. I'm going to generate a newsletter to educate you on these cigars, and I'll put a little gift card in the box as well in case you wanted to give this as a gift. So I left the cafe, and I went over to my buddy John's house, and I pitched him on the idea, and he was on board, and he thought this was a great idea. So we pooled our resources together. I had $8,000, he had $8,000, and we found a third guy to become a silent investor with another $8,000. So we had $24,000 to start this business. So we decided to open our world headquarters in my buddy's 400-square-foot studio apartment. I mean, it was about the size of the stage, and I'm not exaggerating. We pushed his bed in the corner. I got some used desks and some used computers from my brother-in-law, and I got 7 1-800 phone lines piped in this little apartment. And I was ready to get this business going, but there was one thing I had to do. I had to go in and I had to quit my job at the metals company. And I went in and I sat down across from the 2 owners, and I said, I'm going to be leaving, and I said, I'm going to be a millionaire one day. And I shared with them my idea. And you know what they did? They laughed. They said, that is the most ridiculous idea we've ever heard. They said, it's so ridiculous that when you run out of money in 6 weeks, we're going to keep your office here because we're going to hire you back, but with a 20% pay cut. Not quite the words of encouragement I was hoping for, but I'll tell you what, I'm glad they did that because it made me mad. And I left there determined to prove these guys wrong. And I knew the only way this business was going to work is if I could reach the masses, right? And sometimes that requires leaving your comfort zone, right? You have to do things you don't want to do. So I got back to our world headquarters, and I sat down at that used computer that I got from my brother-in-law, and I did something a little bit different. I typed a letter explaining how this Cigar of the Month Club worked, and at the end of the letter, I asked for help, right? It's hard for someone to do, ask for help. And I took the letter and I put it inside of an envelope, and I put the envelope inside of a box because I knew a box would always get opened before an envelope. And I put some cigars in that box. And then I went to a local costume shop, and I bought a pair of these thick Coke bottle nerd glasses that you might wear on Halloween. And I taped a little note right on the bridge of those glasses. And the note read, please take a closer look at my business idea. And I put the glasses on top of the cigars that were on top of that letter, and I sealed the box up, and I made 10 of them. And I sent them out to the top 10 morning radio shows in Chicago. And about a week after those packages went out, my phone rang. And I got a call from the producer of the #1 morning drive show in 1994. It was the Jonathan Brandmeier morning radio show. And this guy had a huge audience. And the producer called me up and she said, Brandmeier will have you on his show for 5 minutes. She said, make your 5 minutes count. And everyone in this room knows the value of 5 minutes, right? Between getting the deal and losing the deal, right? Between making that good impression or making a bad impression. 5 minutes can change your life. So I go to the radio station the morning I'm supposed to, and I meet Brandmeier, and we hit it off instantly. And my 5 minutes turned into 35 minutes at the heart of morning drive time, when everyone was in their car listening to their radios. And then Brandmeier starts to go on, and he starts telling his listeners how he's been a member of this Cigar of the Month Club for years. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is not good. Legally, this is not good. He's going on, but the guy was a brilliant marketer because he kept giving out our 1-800 number every 20 seconds. And I finished the interview, and I couldn't get a cab that morning for some reason, so I sprint back to the apartment where office is, and I kick that door open, and every phone in that apartment is ringing. And I looked over at my partner, John, and he has one phone on his left ear, one on his right ear, and I quickly get over there, and I get my hands on the first phone I can get a hold of, and I take an order from this woman, and she orders a 12-month subscription to the Cigar of the Month Club. And I literally had to stop, and I had to say, lady, are you sure? Like, it's $40 a month. Like, that's a big commitment. She was sure. So I hung up the phone, and I looked over at my partner, John. I said, John, looks like we're going to be in business for at least a year because we've got a 12-month subscription we need to fulfill here. recognizing opportunity and seizing it. So I took that same letter and those glasses and I sent them to radio stations in New York and Los Angeles and Detroit and Seattle, all across the country, and all these radio stations were having me on the air and it wasn't costing me a penny. Now, when you're an entrepreneur, right, you always try to take a good idea and make it better, make it more efficient, make it more profitable, right? How can I take it to the next level? And I said to myself, if this works with radio, what's the next logical step? TV, right? I'm from Chicago. Oprah was filming a show in Chicago at the time. I thought, I'm going to get on Oprah, right? We're going to have a cigar on her couch. We're going to talk about what a great gift this would make. So I modified the letter, and I went to that costume shop, and I bought every pair of those nerd glasses I could get my hands on, and I sent 50 of these packages out to every single daytime talk show and every show on TV. You name it, they got a package. And a week went by, and I didn't get a call. 2 weeks went by, I didn't get a call. It was finally Thursday of that third week, and my phone rang, and I'll never forget. I got my call from my very first TV producer, but it wasn't quite the call that I'd hoped for. I got a call from the producers of the Danny Bonaducci daytime talk show. Does anyone remember Danny? He was Danny Partridge from the Partridge Family. I think he's incarcerated today. But he had a nationally syndicated daytime talk show that was on the air for about 8 weeks before it got canceled. I got on his show twice in 8 weeks. But then I was able to get us on CNN, and I got us on Good Morning America, and I was able to get on a few other TV shows. And after 30 days, we had those phone lines in that apartment. We had over 1,000 members getting these packages sent to their home. And then Father's Day came, and we picked up 3,000 more members. And then the next holiday season came, and it was 7,000, and then 8, and then 10, right? And this thing kept growing and growing and growing. And then it was the late 90s, and the dot-com boom started to take off. Every radio station you'd listen to was dot-com this and dot-com that. And the world around me was changing. Kind of like what we're seeing today, right, in real estate. As a real estate developer, we're seeing some shifts, some adjustment. And I saw that with the cigar world and the gift giving. And I said to myself, the world around me is changing. I need to adapt. I need to react. I need to adjust. I need to become agile, because if I don't, I will become extinct. And I slowly shifted the way I was in my business. I stayed in the cigar business, but I changed the way I reached my customers. I started selling to casinos and resorts and country clubs. I think they were even a customer at the Gaylord Hotel here, right back in the day. We had a sales team that we put together, and we adjusted and pivoted. Where my competitors, who were doing the beer of the month and the wine of the month, they kept their blinders on. They stayed in their comfort zone. They laughed at me. They said, we've been doing this a long time. We're going to keep doing things the way we've always done them. And within 15 months, both of those guys, and I know them, they filed for bankruptcy protection. They didn't adjust. They didn't react. They stayed in their comfort zone. Now, when we had that adjustment, I learned a very important lesson from a girl who worked for me. And she was a sales rep who was out trying to sell casinos and resorts much like this. And she was trying to get this major casino chain. And she was calling on this guy, this buyer, calling on him, and getting no luck at all. Finally, it was probably her 10th call, and she'd go in and meet with this guy. And for the first time, she kind of stopped and became present in the moment. And she was sitting there waiting in his office for him, and she noticed on his back credenza, he had this shrine of all these pictures of his dog. And she had the pitch meeting, and she left, and she did something a little bit different. When she left, she went to a pet store, and she put together a little gift basket with treats and biscuits, $10 worth of stuff. And she said, thanks for the meeting, and she dropped the basket off. She got the account. She got the account because she paid attention, because she had enough clarity, right, to focus on what was happening. She used a trait that is so underutilized in business, and it's what I call using empathy in business, right? The word empathy, oftentimes it's misunderstood. When I throw the word empathy out, most people say, oh, you got to give someone a hug, or you're feeling sorry for someone, right? You're going to be empathetic. Some of the greatest business minds that we have today use empathy in business, right? Jeff Bezos, Amazon. He finds people's pain points, and he comes up with profitable solutions, right? Empathy in business is when you can walk a mile in your customer's shoes or your employee's shoes. It's seeing the world from their eyes, not your own eyes. It's checking your ego at the door. Steve Jobs once said, people don't know what they want until you show them. And he's absolutely right. Empathy in business. And I have learned how to do that, And I was able to continue using that in the cigar business. And then in 2000, when I sold the company, and I started to develop real estate. A buddy of mine convinced me to buy my first rental building. And it was like a 6 or 8 unit building, and I was going to convert it into a luxury apartment building. And I was gutting it and rehabbing it, and I was putting all my money into this building, and I was going to be a big real estate developer. And I was about 80% done with the renovation, and I was out to dinner. This was before I was married. I was on a dinner date, and my phone rang. And this guy calls me up. He says, "Is this Bill Rancic?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, this is Tom from Busy Bee Board Up Company. Your building's on fire. When the fire department leaves, would you like us to board it up for you?" And I thought this was my buddy Carson playing a gag on me, and I hung up. And about 5 minutes later, another number came through, and it was another board-up company. These guys are incredible. They listen to fire scanners, right? And he said, "This is Phil from, XYZ, and your building's on fire." At that point, I excused myself. And I get in a cab, and I make it about 3 blocks from the building, and all the streets are closed down, and there's a hook and ladder truck, right? Well, my building was one of 3 that were burned that night. It was the victim of arson, right? Because this neighborhood was changing, as many of you know, and some people don't like when neighborhoods change. Well, I had made the one mistake. I bought the insurance policy from a college buddy. Anyone here familiar with insurance? I was not at the time. I am now. But I had bought what was called actual value versus replacement value. Well, this was about an 80-year-old building, so it wasn't a really good situation for me. So just as that building had burned, I got a call from a friend of mine's mother, and she said, "There's a new show with Donald Trump, and they're looking for young entrepreneurs. And I think you'd be great." Now, if this wasn't a lightning bolt coming down from the heavens of God, right, I have a chance to go work from a real estate developer. My first real estate project was not a great success. I said, "Well, can you tell me more about it, this show?" She says, "No, I made you an appointment on Thursday at 3 o'clock. Go meet with these people." So I go, and they explain the concept of the show. Every week we're going to start a new business from scratch. And they had 215,000 people that were applying. And then they narrowed it down to 50, and I became part of the final 50. And they flew those final 50 to Los Angeles, and they put us through a battery of tests for a week. And then at the end of the week, I got called into a room with a guy named Mark Burnett, and he let me know that I was the alternate contestant. So I wasn't the last one chosen. I was behind the last one chosen, right? They had 16 people. I was number 17. Something happened to number 16, and I got called up off the bench, and I was the last guy to go on the show. And we battled it out for like 15 weeks, right? Brutal. Harvard, Yale, all these tough business people. And it was a grind. 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. I mean, it was awful. And before I knew it, I looked to my right and I looked to my left, and there's only one other person still standing there. And it was just my luck the guy had his MBA from Harvard, right? Smart guy, very talented guy. And we battled it out in the final round. And then in front of 30 million people on live national television, Trump hired me on. And it was amazing. It was a moment I will never forget. But my celebration literally lasted a moment, because after he said, "You're hired," I was whisked away, and I had to go on a 2-week tour of all these talk shows. Jay Leno, The Today Show, Larry King, Ellen, I had to do the whole gamut. Where were those people when I was stuck doing Danny Bonaducci? I sure as hell could have used them then. Would have been a lot richer. But I finished that tour, and I made my way back home to Chicago. And it was the first time I had any peace or quiet in literally months. And I remember sitting there in my family room, and I thought to myself, why me? What separated me from the pack of all these people who wanted to win? There were 215,000 people who started. Why was I the last person standing? And I thought about it, and I really came up with 3 reasons why I was able to win. And I think these are why people are successful in business. The first one is I understood the term practical execution, right? Practical execution means show me, don't tell me. It means actions speak louder than words. It means put your head down, keep your mouth shut, and that's how you get ahead. And that's what I did on the show. I didn't talk a good game. I didn't get into the politics and the backstabbing and all the game playing. I let my results speak for myself, right? And that's what I did week after week after week. Secondly, I knew the value of agility, right? Because I did it with the cigar company. And on The Apprentice, each week we were given a different business challenge, right? And most of the people had the same management style and the same strategy week after week after week. They didn't adapt, they didn't adjust, they didn't react. I changed up my game plan and my strategy each week. I knew that I had to change, otherwise I was going to be stagnant, right? These people weren't agile. And thirdly, I knew the word risk, but I knew how to manage risk. I knew how to respect risk. I knew how to convert risk into success, right? And success is a funny word. And I often wonder, why are some people successful and statistically in the entrepreneurial world, the majority not? And it's a very difficult question to answer, but for me, it's actually a simple answer, and it comes down to one word, and that word is fear.